Why was the room so silent when Colonel Cross asked the question? 20 men, some of the toughest operators Delta Force had, stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the floor, the walls, anywhere but the man at the head of the table. The desert wind rattled the thin metal walls of the command container, carrying with it the smell of diesel fuel and the weight of something worse, defeat. The colonel's voice had cut through the tension a moment earlier. Any Black Hawk pilots here? It wasn't a question asked lightly. It was desperation dressed in command authority. And the silence that followed was deafening. The fluorescent lights above buzzed as if mocking them. The map spread across the table showed nothing but impossible geometry. 3 operators pinned in a compound northeast of the base, surrounded by at least 30 professional fighters. One of the men, Burke, was bleeding out. The clock was already running. Without a bird in the sky, without air support, those men wouldn't see another sunrise. Colonel Kenneth Cross was a man who had built a career out of pulling miracles from thin air, but tonight his face carried the look of a commander running out of cards. 2 decades of combat had carved deep lines into his expression, but it wasn't age that bent his shoulders in that moment. It was the brutal arithmetic of survival. Master Sergeant Herrera leaned against the wall, his temples still crusted with dried blood. The firefight hours earlier had left him scarred and furious. His massive frame seemed to hold the room together by sheer presence, but even he looked powerless. Lieutenant Palmer sat hunched over the radio set, his voice hoarse from calling out into the void. Every attempt at raising air support had been swallowed by static. Every failure deepened the cracks in his young face. The colonel's words lingered in the stale air. Any pilots? No one moved. It wasn't that they lacked courage. These were men who had volunteered for the kind of missions other units never heard about. But flying a U-60 Black Hawk wasn't something you improvised. It took years of training, thousands of hours in the cockpit. And tonight, with no functional aircraft cleared for flight and the best mechanics already shaking their heads, the question sounded less like a plan and more like a prayer. The youngest in the room, Corporal Ortega, shifted uncomfortably near the back. He fought bravely that day, but the helplessness etched into the faces around him rattled him more than bullets ever had. Even Chavez, the steady, calm sergeant, looked hollowed out from hours of listening to faint, desperate transmissions from the trapped men. Cross's voice hardened. Think outside the box. Somebody on this base has flown. Somebody can do this. Find them. He was searching their eyes, daring one of them to step forward. And then, almost too quietly to notice, movement stirred in the corner. A figure who had blended so seamlessly into the background that most had forgotten she was even in the room. Captain Valerie Hunt, the quiet communications officer, the one who handled radios and frequencies, the one who rarely spoke unless spoken to. She rose to her feet. Every head turned. Even Herrera straightened, his brows knitting in disbelief. The colonel's pulse quickened, but his face stayed unreadable. Commanders learned to hide hope until it proved itself. Captain Hunt, he said evenly, be specific about your qualifications. Her voice didn't waver. I flew U-60 Black Hawks for 8 years, 2 tours in Iraq, 3 in Afghanistan, over 400 combat flight hours, including medevacs, special operations insertions, and direct action support. Silence again, but this time it was different. Palmer's mouth fell open. Ortega leaned forward, suddenly alive with disbelief. Even Chavez, exhausted at her console, looked up sharply. Herrera was the first to speak, his voice edged with skepticism. Ma'am, with respect, your file says you're comms. There's nothing in there about aviation. Hunt turned, her dark hair pulled tight in regulation fashion, her face calm but firm. My file says what the Army decided it should say. Soldiers get reclassified for reasons that don't always reflect their abilities. Her words carried no bravado, only fact. The grizzled maintenance chief, Collins, narrowed his eyes. You're saying you can fly that bird on the pad. The one with leaking hydraulics and a fuel system I don't trust. I'm saying, she replied steadily, that if it will start and stay airborne long enough, I can get it there and bring our people home. The question is whether you'll let me try. Her answer cracked something in the room. For the first time that night, possibility glimmered through the despair. But questions still hung heavy. Why communications? The colonel asked, his tone quiet but cutting. Why walk away if you were current and qualified? A muscle in her jaw tightened. For the first time her composure faltered. Personal reasons, sir, but those reasons don't affect my ability to fly. Herrera crossed his arms, his skepticism not unkind but weighted with experience. Personal reasons have a way of showing up when the cockpit fills with smoke. You sure you're ready to sit back in that seat? Hunt met his gaze, steady and unflinching. Sergeant, right now your men are dying. Every minute we debate my past is a minute closer to their deaths. I can fly, but I need that helicopter now. The words weren't loud, but they carried more weight than any shout could. Lieutenant Palmer leaned forward, his voice tentative. Ma'am, what's your call sign? The hesitation that followed was the first real crack in her armor. A heartbeat stretched too long before she answered. Blackbird. The name rippled across the room like an electric current. Collins even let out a low whistle. Jesus Christ, you were Mitchell's wingman, the Helmand River extraction. Recognition spread like wildfire. Even the newest operators had heard of it, two Black Hawks flying into a sandstorm, pulling out a reconnaissance team while mortars fell like rain. One bird had been shot down. The other had carried 12 men to safety. The pilots of that mission had become legend. And Hunt had been there. Cross understood now. Sarah Mitchell, killed 6 months ago on a supply run. Hunt had lost her commander, her partner. That explained the transfer, the silence, the way she had tried to vanish into the background. Ma'am, Herrera said. His skepticism softened into something like awe. If you're really Blackbird, then you've got more combat hours than anyone left in theater. She deflected the weight of their eyes with practiced precision. Flight hours mean nothing if the aircraft won't fly. Chief Collins, status of the U-60. The chief rubbed a hand over his oil-streaked face. Main rotor solid. Engines will run. Hydraulics are bleeding bad. Backup systems shot. Fuel leaks patched, but I don't like the look of it. No defensive systems, no countermeasures. You'll be naked in a hot zone. Hunt didn't blink. Weapons. 2 door guns. One with ammo, about 300 rounds, that's it. She absorbed the grim math without outward reaction. She had flown worse. But she had never flown alone, never without a crew, never in a machine this broken. Major Dixon stepped in, her voice tight with regulation. Colonel, even if this pilot's credentials are accurate, a single unsupported aircraft into hostile territory violates every protocol we have. Cross didn't hesitate. Those protocols were written by people who never had to watch men die while paperwork sat on a desk. I'll take responsibility. Hunt stepped forward, her voice steady, calm. Then we move now. Every minute we wait is a minute closer to losing them. The colonel studied her face one last time. He didn't see bravado. He didn't see recklessness. He saw certainty. And sometimes that was all command required. Chief Collins, he said, get the bird ready, 30 minutes. The chief nodded and was already moving. Captain Hunt, Cross added, his voice carrying the full weight of command. You'll have minimal support, no backup, and an aircraft barely held together. Are you absolutely sure? Her answer was quiet, but it carried the certainty of someone who had already decided. Sir, I didn't survive 400 missions by accident. Get me that helicopter and I'll bring them home. The room erupted into motion. Operators grabbing gear, radios sparking to life, mechanics sprinting toward the flight line. And Valerie Hunt, Blackbird, felt something she hadn't felt in months, the rhythm of purpose. the fear-laced exhilaration of knowing that the night was about to demand everything of her. She stepped into the Afghan night, the wind clawing at her uniform, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like herself again. What kind of pilot volunteers to fly a machine already half dead? That question echoed across the flight line as floodlights spilled over the battered Black Hawk waiting like a wounded beast. Its dark paint, faded and scarred, carried the story of too many years and too many wars. Captain Valerie Hunt walked slowly around it, boots crunching on gravel, her hand trailing along its battered fuselage. Every inch of metal whispered danger, stress fractures along the rotor, patched holes across the tail, and hydraulic lines streaked with oil-like veins bleeding beneath skin. To most, it looked like wreckage. To her, it was an old companion asking if she still remembered how to speak its language. Chief Collins emerged from under the belly, his coveralls stained with fluid. His face was already slick with sweat. "She'll fly," he said, though even his gruff voice carried doubt. "Engines will hold, but hydraulics are failing, and once they go, you'll be muscle flying a 10,000-pound brick." Hunt crouched by the leaking lines, her fingers brushing them like a surgeon probing wounds. The smell of burnt fuel mixed with sand. It was a smell she knew too well. She exhaled slowly, forcing calm into her body. How long before full failure? Collins didn't sugarcoat it. Could be 20 minutes, could be 10. Once you push her hard in combat, less. She nodded, the answer already folded into her calculations. Pilots lived on math. Distance, fuel, weight, time. Tonight, the math said this mission was suicide. But numbers didn't measure loyalty. They didn't measure 3 men bleeding in the dirt, waiting for someone who might never come. Staff Sergeant Chavez jogged up, carrying a helmet and radio set. She looked at Hunt as if seeing her for the first time. "Ma'am, I've programmed emergency frequencies. The trapped team knows you're inbound. Their last transmission said they were holding, but ammo's running low." Hunt took the helmet, testing the earphones, adjusting the mic. The hiss of static filled her ears, then the clipped chaos of a war zone, patrols checking in, supply requests, frantic voices threading across the net. Beneath it all, she listened for the one voice that mattered. "What's the situation at the compound?" she asked. Lieutenant Palmer ran over, tablet in hand, his face pale in the floodlight's glare. "Drone feed shows 25, maybe more, enemy fighters around the perimeter. They've dug in with overlapping fields of fire. It's not militia, ma'am, it's professionals. They're waiting for us." Hunt studied the grainy satellite images. The compound sat in a valley surrounded by ridges perfect for ambushes. A gauntlet. One way in, one way out. Every approach angle painted with hostile fire. She swallowed the knot in her throat. "Landing zone?" she asked. "Courtyard 40 meters square. Tight. Surrounded by 3 walls. Only option we've got." Her eyes lingered on the map. Tight landing zones demanded precision, and precision demanded control. With hydraulics bleeding out, precision would be the first thing to go. She closed her eyes for a moment, steadying her breathing. And then Herrera's voice cut through. "Ma'am, I'm going with you." She looked up sharply. The sergeant stood already geared, his vest heavy with ammo, his eyes unwavering. "This bird can't afford extra weight," Hunt replied flatly. "With respect," Herrera countered, "you can't fly, talk to ground, and cover the landing zone at once. You need a gunner. You need someone to drag those men aboard while you keep the bird in the air." His logic was brutal but true. She hated it. Every extra pound cost her precious maneuverability, but every hand mattered once the rotors touched dirt. Colonel Cross appeared, his presence heavy with authority. "He's right, minimal crew, Herrera only, no one else." Hunt clenched her jaw, then gave the smallest nod. "One gunner, nothing more." Herrera's grim smile was all the agreement she needed. She climbed into the cockpit, the seat both alien and familiar. Months since she'd last strapped in, yet the switches and dials glowed like old friends. Her hands moved automatically, fuel, battery, ignition. The Black Hawk came alive in shudders and groans, its turbines whining, its rotors dragging themselves into motion. Warning lights glared red across the panel, screaming about systems she already knew were broken. She silenced the alarms with a flick, because tonight there was no alternative. From the corner of her vision, she caught Herrera sliding into the cabin, checking the lone door gun with the calm efficiency of a man who'd seen too many battles. He looked back at her once, eyes steady, as if to say, "If this is the end, then let's make it count." Colonel Cross appeared at the door, his weathered face lit by rotor wash. He leaned in, voice steady but low. "Captain, my men are counting on you. Bring them home." Hunt met his gaze. "They'll be home before sunrise." The words left her lips with quiet conviction, though inside, she wasn't certain if it was a promise or a prayer. The engines screamed higher, the ground trembling beneath them. Dust lifted in violent spirals. Floodlights blurred. People gathered on the edges of the pad, drawn by the sound of a bird they never expected to see fly again. Her headset crackled, Cross's voice clear through the storm. "Blackbird, you are cleared for takeoff. Godspeed." She pulled collective pitch. The Black Hawk shuddered, reluctant, straining against its own broken body. For a terrifying second it hovered as if undecided. Then, with a groan like old bones snapping, it lifted. The base fell away beneath them, floodlights shrinking into the desert night. The Afghan sky stretched endless and dark, stars smothered by dust and engine smoke. And Valerie Hunt, Blackbird, was flying again. Every control input fought her. The hydraulics bled faster under stress, making the stick feel like dead weight. Sweat broke across her forehead as she forced the bird to level out. She whispered to herself, old habits from years in the cockpit. "Easy, girl, just a little longer, just hold together." Herrera's voice came from the back. "Radio chatter on enemy nets. They're moving. They know we're coming." Her pulse spiked. She pushed the throttle harder, squeezing speed out of turbines already running hot. Warning lights flared red. She ignored them. Her headset crackled static, then a broken voice. Any station, this is Hammer 2 Alpha under heavy fire, running low." It was Morgan, one of the trapped operators. His voice was strained, ragged. Hunt keyed her mic. "Hammer 2 Alpha, this is Blackbird. We are inbound. Hold your position. 8 minutes out." There was silence, then a faint reply. "Roger, can hold, not much longer. Burke's unconscious, losing blood fast." Her throat tightened. She glanced at the horizon, where shadows hid ridges crawling with mercenaries waiting to kill them all. 8 minutes. That was all she had to make the impossible possible. And as the helicopter clawed through the Afghan night, she felt the old fear return, the fear she had buried when Sarah Mitchell's bird went down. She had promised herself she'd never sit in the seat again. Promised she wouldn't live through the fire, the screaming, the helplessness of watching a wingman vanish into smoke. But here she was, hands locked on the controls, engines howling, men's lives hanging on the decisions she made in the next breath. Her heart pounded, but her voice stayed calm. "Hold on, Hammer 2 Alpha, Blackbird is coming." And in the night sky, with nothing but desert and death below her, Valerie Hunt became a pilot again. How do you fly into a place built to kill you? That was the question tightening around Valerie Hunt's chest as the compound came into view on the horizon. A cluster of low buildings surrounded by rocky ridges, lit only by the erratic flashes of gunfire. Through her headset, she could hear the distant bursts of small arms, the crack of rifles echoing across the valley floor. Somewhere inside those walls, 3 Americans were still alive. For now. "Blackbird, this is Hammer 2 Alpha," the radio crackled again, Morgan's voice fraying with static and exhaustion. "Red smoke in 30 seconds, northwest corner of the courtyard." "Copy," Hunt replied, her jaw tightening. "Hold position, we're almost there." She banked the Black Hawk low, using the terrain to mask her approach. The stick fought her with every motion, hydraulics bleeding out, warning lights glowing like angry eyes across her instrument panel. Each input required strength that made her arms tremble, but she forced the bird down, skimming the desert floor, trusting the ridges to shield her from prying eyes. Behind her, Herrera braced at the door gun, scanning the night with sharp, practiced eyes. His voice was calm, but she could hear the tension under it. Radio chatters spiking. They know something coming. Feels like they're waiting on us. Her stomach knotted. Of course they were waiting. These weren't ragtag fighters spraying bullets blindly. They were mercenaries, professionals. They had set the trap, and she was about to fly straight into it. She pushed the thought aside, focusing on the math. Altitude, speed, angle of approach. She picked her path, a razor-thin corridor from the south, using a collapsed building for concealment. The red smoke bloomed suddenly, a crimson column cutting through the night. Her eyes locked onto it, confirmation of life. She could almost see them now, shapes moving in the courtyard, muzzle flashes from desperate rifles keeping the enemy at bay. "Visual on friendlies," she announced, voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her veins. Herrera leaned forward, scanning through his sight. "I've got movement on the ridges, east and north, RPG teams, they're setting up." Her blood ran cold. RPGs were the death sentence of helicopters, too fast to dodge, too deadly to ignore. She gritted her teeth and banked sharply, throwing the bird into a rough, evasive maneuver. The hydraulics screamed, warning lights flashing red. The stick felt like stone, fighting her every movement. Sweat streamed down her temples. The first RPG streaked past, a trail of fire splitting the sky. It detonated against the ridge, showering sparks and rock shards across the valley. The blast rattled the Black Hawk, but she kept control. "East Ridge, second team," Herrera shouted. His door gun erupted in controlled bursts, tracers tearing across the dark, lighting up silhouettes crouched with launchers. One disappeared in a spray of dust and debris. Another ducked back into cover. "Stay with me," Hunt whispered, both to the machine beneath her and the men waiting below. She shoved the collective forward, forcing the helicopter lower, faster, threading through tracer fire that cut the night like green lasers. The compound expanded beneath them now, walls scarred with bullet impacts, shadows moving between cover. She could see them clearly at last. Two figures crouched behind a low wall, rifles barking, one dragging the limp form of another. That was Burke. Her chest tightened. She couldn't let herself think about his condition, couldn't think about the possibility of being too late. She had one job: put this machine down, get them aboard, and get out alive. "Blackbird, this is Hammer 2 Alpha. We're ready, move now." "Copy," Hunt answered, her voice clipped. She dropped the nose, pushing the Black Hawk into a descent that felt like falling. The stick fought her every inch. Hydraulic pressure had fallen into the red. Her arms screamed from the effort of holding the machine steady. 50 feet, she muttered, eyes darting between the courtyard and her failing gauges. Gunfire hammered the fuselage. Bullets punched through aluminum with metallic thuds, sparks dancing in the cockpit. The smell of hydraulic fluid and burning insulation filled her lungs. She forced herself not to flinch. 20 feet. The courtyard erupted in chaos. Herrera's gun thundered, cutting swaths of fire across windows and rooftops. Taylor and Morgan broke from cover, dragging Burke's limp body across the open ground. Tracer rounds zipped past them, sparks kicking up dirt at their heels. Hunt fought the stick, sweat dripping from her chin. The bird bucked, pulling against her will, the controls heavy as iron. She wrestled it level, forcing the skids toward the ground. 10 feet. Her arms burned, every muscle screaming. Hydraulic alarms wailed. She ignored them. Her eyes were locked on that patch of ground, that tiny square of safety amid the storm. Then the skids hit, hard, bone-jarring. The Black Hawk slammed into the courtyard with the force of a crash, hydraulics bursting in a hiss of fluid. The airframe shuddered, metal groaning under the strain. But they were down. On the ground, she shouted, though her voice was drowned by the roar of engines and gunfire. Herrera was out of his seat instantly, pivoting the door gun, hammering bursts at muzzle flashes on the ridges. Move, move, move. Taylor and Morgan staggered up with Burke between them, his body limp, blood soaking through field dressings. They reached the bird, muscles straining to heave him into the cabin. Morgan's face was pale, his eyes wide with desperation. He's alive, but barely. Get him in, Hunt snapped, her eyes glued to the instrument panel. Warning lights screamed at her, engine overheating, hydraulics failing, fuel pressure dropping. She had minutes, maybe less, before the Black Hawk gave up completely. Another RPG streaked past, detonating against the outer wall. The blast rocked the helicopter sideways, Burke nearly sliding back out before Taylor yanked him fully in. All aboard, Herrera bellowed, voice hoarse. Hunt didn't hesitate. She shoved the collective, forcing the wounded bird to lift. The Black Hawk groaned, hydraulics spitting fluid, controls fighting like a wild animal. But it rose, climbing out of the courtyard as tracers followed, crisscrossing the air they had occupied seconds earlier. The ridges lit up with coordinated fire, the ambush springing its final trap. Bullets sparked against the fuselage. Warning alarms cascaded across her panel. The starboard engine coughed, then roared back with a sickly vibration. Taking hits, Hunt called, though her voice was calm, steady. Herrera fired until his barrel smoked, cutting into the shadows, buying them seconds at a time. Behind him, Morgan and Taylor pressed their hands against Burke's wounds, their faces tight with fear and determination. The Black Hawk clawed skyward, every inch a battle against gravity and machine. Hunt's arms shook from the strain, but she held on. She couldn't think about the flames licking her engine, or the fuel pressure sinking into danger, or the fact that hydraulics were moments away from total failure. She thought about Burke's shallow breathing, about Taylor's desperate face, about Morgan's voice crackling through static, begging for someone to come. And she thought about Sarah Mitchell, her commander, her friend, lost in smoke and fire 6 months earlier. Not tonight, not again. She gritted her teeth, every muscle burning, and dragged the bird higher. The valley fell away beneath them, tracers fatting into distance, explosions echoing like thunder. But the battle was far from over. Warning lights glared, alarms screamed, and smoke curled from the starboard engine. They were airborne, alive, but only barely. And ahead of them stretched miles of darkness, with a failing machine and death still chasing their tail. The sky was not freedom tonight. It was a battlefield that wanted them dead. Valerie Hunt gripped the controls so tightly her knuckles burned white. The Black Hawk trembled, every vibration screaming that it was on the edge of collapse. Warning alarms cascaded in a symphony of doom, engine temperature critical, hydraulic pressure failing, tail rotor stress. The cockpit glowed red with flashing lights, like the bird itself was warning her, "I'm dying, and I'll take you with me." But beneath the chaos, her training whispered steady. She tuned out the alarms, tuned out the chaos, and listened to the rhythm of the machine. The rotors thrum, the turbines whine, the deep groan of stressed metal. She had spent years speaking this language, and even now, after everything, it came back like breathing. Behind her, Herrera's voice roared over the gunfire. "Contact rear, they're chasing with technicals." She didn't dare look. She could hear it, the staccato bursts of mounted machine guns opening fire, the ping of rounds biting into her fuselage. Sparks erupted along the frame. Panels shook loose. Herrera's door gun spat back, tracers cutting through the night. "I'll keep them honest," he barked, his tone almost calm, almost amused, as if defiance itself was his weapon. But Hunt knew the truth. The Black Hawk was bleeding altitude. One engine was coughing like a dying animal. Every second airborne was a borrowed miracle. She pulled harder on the collective, muscles screaming as the hydraulics resisted. The stick felt like dead stone. Her shoulders burned. Sweat streaked her helmet pads. She whispered through gritted teeth, Not tonight, not again. Her eyes flicked to the altimeter dangerously low. She was skimming barely above rooftops, dodging power lines and trees by instinct. The desert sprawled in shadows below, but any attempt to climb higher would stall them, maybe even tear the bird apart. "Blackbird, this is base," Cross's voice cracked through the headset, urgent but steady. "Status." She keyed her mic, her voice level though her heart thundered. "We've got all three, one critical taking heavy fire, aircraft compromised, attempting egress south." There was silence for a moment, then the colonel's voice dropped lower, softer. "You bring them home, Captain, no matter what it takes." Her throat tightened. She couldn't reply. Words felt dangerous, like promises too fragile to make. Instead, she focused on the night ahead. Morgan's voice broke through from the back, strained with panic. "He's fatting, Burke's barely breathing." Taylor shouted over him, hands pressed against the wounded man's chest. "We need medevac now, he won't make it." Hunt swallowed the lump in her throat. Medevac wasn't coming. They were the medevac. And in that moment, Mitchell's face flashed in her mind. Sarah Mitchell, her old commander, sitting in a cockpit just like this one, calm in chaos, steady in fire. The day her bird was hit, Valerie had been on her wing. She had listened to Mitchell's voice crackle with smoke, with static, with resignation. She had promised herself she would never fly again, never let her hands touch controls that could not save the one she loved. But here she was, and this time she refused to let the story end the same way. "Hang on," she whispered, not to her crew, not to the bird, but to herself. Herrera's gun rattled again, cutting down a pursuing truck in a spray of fire. "That's one, two more still coming." The chase tightened. Hunt banked left, forcing the Black Hawk into a brutal evasive dive. The hydraulics moaned. The tail rotor screamed in protest. She leveled out inches above the ground, the skids almost grazing sand and rock. Bullets chewed the earth behind them, sparks chasing their shadow. The controls grew heavier, each movement slower, like flying through cement. Hydraulic pressure was nearly gone. Her arms felt like lead. She fought the urge to panic because panic was death. "Come on, girl," she whispered to the bird. "You've still got one fight left in you." The radio crackled suddenly, not with Cross's voice but with the ragged breath of Morgan. "Ma'am, if we don't make it, you need to know Burke. He's got 2 kids. Don't let them grow up without knowing he fought to the last." Her chest seized. She forced her voice calm, steady. "He's not dying tonight, Morgan, not on my watch." Her mind screamed at her for lying. Her heart begged her to make it true. Ahead, the ridges gave way to open desert. Flat, endless, unforgiving. No cover, no escape. The mercenaries would have clear shots the moment she left the valley. Herrera's bursts grew shorter, his voice strained. "Ammo's almost dry. We've got maybe 30 rounds left." She bit her lip until it bled. They wouldn't survive another stretch like this. Not with the bird failing, not with enemies closing. And then she saw it, a narrow canyon cutting south like a scar across the land. Steep walls, tight turns, a pilot's nightmare. But it offered concealment, maybe even a path home. Her hands moved before her brain could argue. She banked hard, forcing the Black Hawk toward the canyon mouth. "Ma'am, are you insane?" Herrera yelled, bracing against the tilt. "Trust me," she snapped. "It's the only way." The helicopter dove into the canyon, walls rising like jagged teeth on either side. Bullets sparked against rock, echoes multiplying in the confined space. She weaved the bird through impossible angles, scraping by sheer instinct, every muscle in her arms on fire. The mercenaries tried to follow, but their technicals couldn't keep pace on the jagged terrain. Gunfire faded behind them, replaced by the howl of engines straining in the tight corridor. But victory tasted like ash. Hydraulic fluid splattered across her boots. The stick went stiff, almost locked. The bird began to drift, nose dipping dangerously. "Control going," she muttered, panic pressing against her ribs. Herrera's voice dropped quiet, low, almost like prayer. Then fly it with your soul, ma'am. That's what pilots do. She clenched her teeth, forcing the stick back, muscles screaming. Her vision blurred from sweat and exhaustion, but slowly, agonizingly, the bird leveled. The canyon opened wider ahead, stars spilling back into view. Freedom was close. But so was failure. The starboard engine flared, coughing smoke into the night. The tail rotor screeched. The entire bird shuddered violently, like a beast in its death throes. And in that moment, Valerie Hunt made a choice. She could force the bird higher, try to muscle it back to base, risk losing everything in a fiery crash. Or she could set it down now, in the middle of nowhere, and hope the desert gave them a chance to survive until rescue came. The decision clawed at her. She thought of Mitchell, thought of Burke's children, thought of the men staring at her with their lives in her hands. And with a deep, shuddering breath, she whispered into her mic, "Base, this is Blackbird. We're not going to make it back. I'm putting her down." There is no calm way to crash a helicopter. Valerie Hunt knew that truth intimately as the Black Hawk bucked beneath her hands, its dying frame thrashing like a wounded animal. Warning lights flared red across the cockpit, alarms howling in a chorus of failure. Smoke filled her lungs, acrid and thick, stinging her eyes. The starboard engine was gone. Hydraulics had bled dry. She was holding on to control by raw muscle and sheer will. "Brace!" she screamed, her voice cutting through the chaos. Herrera grabbed onto the gun mount, his jaw clenched. In the back, Morgan and Taylor clutched Burke's limp body, their faces twisted in terror. The bird pitched hard, skids scraping the canyon wall as sparks rained past the windshield. Hunt's arms burned as she fought the stick. Every second felt eternal, each one carrying the weight of survival or death. Her body shook, teeth grinding, but her eyes stayed locked on the canyon floor, rushing up to meet them. "Easy, easy," she muttered, half commanding the helicopter, half begging. The Black Hawk hit the ground once, hard, bouncing like a stone skipping water. Metal shrieked as the tail slammed into rock. The cabin rattled violently, throwing men sideways. Herrera cursed, firing off a string of prayers that sounded more like war cries. Then the bird hit again, this time staying down. The skids dug into the sand and gravel, the fuselage grinding forward in a storm of sparks and twisted metal. The sound was unbearable, steel tearing itself apart, rotors screaming against the canyon walls. Valerie held on, knuckles bone-white, refusing to let go until the machine decided it was done. And then silence. The helicopter groaned to a stop, tilted sideways, smoke pouring from its engines. The only sound was the crackle of cooling metal and the ragged, panicked breaths of the living. For a long moment, no one moved. The desert itself seemed to hold its breath. Hunt's hand stayed frozen on the controls, trembling. Her helmet was ringing with alarms that no longer mattered, lights flashing warnings on systems already dead. Slowly, she released the stick, her arms falling limp, too heavy to lift again. Her chest heaved. She had done it, brought them down alive. But at what cost? "Everyone sound off," she croaked, her voice rough from smoke. Herrera coughed, spitting black soot. "Alive somehow. Back feels like I wrestled a bull." "Taylor here," came a strained voice from the rear. "Still breathing," Morgan added hoarsely. "Burke's alive, but barely." Relief flooded her chest so hard it almost hurt. They had survived the impossible. But survival was fragile. She forced herself out of the cockpit, stumbling into the cabin. Burke lay motionless on the deck, his skin pale, lips cracked. Taylor's hands were red to the elbows, pressing desperately against fresh bandages that couldn't keep pace with the blood. "We need a medic yesterday," Taylor hissed, panic in his eyes. Hunt crouched, feeling Burke's pulse with shaking fingers. Faint, weak, slipping. She swallowed hard, forcing calm into her voice. "He's still here. That means he can keep fighting. Morgan, get me saline from the kit. Herrera, perimeter now." Herrera didn't argue. He kicked the cabin door open, stepping into the night, rifle raised. His silhouette cut sharp against the canyon walls as he scanned for movement. Morgan scrambled, fumbling through supplies, his hands trembling. The desert was cold now, the heat of day long gone, replaced by air sharp enough to cut through uniforms. The canyon walls loomed high, blocking the stars, making the wreck feel like a tomb. Taylor's eyes darted to Hunt. "We won't hold here long. If those mercs are smart, they'll track us." "They're smart," Hunt said flatly, already securing Burke's IV. "But they don't know where we came down, not yet. That buys us time." Time, that was all she could think about. Time for Burke's pulse. Time for rescue. Time for mercenaries to find them. Every tick of the clock pressed like a blade at her throat. She looked at her bird, her once trusted machine, now nothing but twisted steel. The rotors hung crooked, the tail shredded, smoke curling from shattered engines. She had asked it for one last miracle. It had given it, and now it was gone. Her chest tightened. For a moment she let herself feel it, the grief, the exhaustion, the guilt. Mitchell's voice echoed in her mind, that last transmission from 6 months ago. "We're going down. I'll see you on the other side, Blackbird." Valerie shook her head, shoving the ghost away. She couldn't afford it now, not with 3 men counting on her. Herrera's voice called from outside, sharp and low. "Movement on the ridge. 2 silhouettes, could be scouts." Hunt grabbed her rifle, adrenaline surging again. She crawled to the cabin door, peering into the night. Shadows moved along the canyon lip, distant but deliberate. They were hunting. She keyed her radio, voice urgent but steady. "Base, this is Blackbird. Bird down. We're alive but compromised. Location transmitting now. Immediate extraction required." Static answered her. No cross, no command, only dead air. She tried again, adjusting frequencies, her fingers tight on the mic. "Base, this is Blackbird. Do you copy? Repeat, bird down, requesting immediate support." Nothing. Her stomach dropped. The canyon walls were cutting her signal, trapping them in a silent coffin. Taylor's voice cracked. "They don't know we're alive." Hunt forced her expression calm. "Then we'll make sure they find out." Morgan looked at her, fear and hope warring in his eyes. "And if the mercs find us first?" Valerie chambered around, her voice like stone. "Then they'll regret it." For a moment, silence settled again, broken only by Burke's shallow breathing. The desert wind whispered through the canyon, carrying with it the faint, unmistakable sound of engines in the distance. Herrera spat into the dirt, his eyes narrowing. "They're coming." Hunt felt the weight of it settle on her chest, the truth she had always known but never wanted to face. The mission wasn't over. The rescue wasn't complete. She had bought them minutes, maybe an hour, but the night was still hunting them. And in that canyon, with nothing but rifles, fatting supplies, and one dying man, Valerie Hunt, Blackbird, realized the hardest part was only beginning. The desert had a way of holding sound. Every echo seemed to stretch, bounce, and return in whispers that felt alive. In the canyon, the silence was not a comfort. It was a predator circling in the dark. Valerie Hunt sat crouched against the wreck of her Black Hawk, her rifle pressed tight against her shoulder. Her ears strained past the crackle of cooling metal, past Burke's labored breathing, past her own pounding heart. Out there, beyond the canyon walls, engines hummed. Too many. Too close. Herrera eased back into the cabin, crouching low, his voice a harsh whisper. 3 trucks, lights off, north approach, moving slow. They know we're down here." Taylor swore under his breath, his hand still pressing against Burke's wounds. "We don't have the ammo for this." Morgan shifted nervously, scanning the canyon mouth. "How many are we talking?" Herrera's face was grim. "More than 10. Maybe 20, could be more behind." The air thickened, the walls of the canyon closing in with every number he spoke. Hunt's grip tightened on her rifle. Outnumbered, outgunned, trapped. It was the same math that had haunted her since the moment she took the controls. But math never accounted for will. She pulled her headset back over her ears, testing the radio again, knowing it was futile. Static hissed like a mocking voice. The canyon had swallowed their cries. Base didn't know. No one was coming. Not yet. Options? She asked, forcing her voice steady. Herrera smirked darkly. Shoot until they stop moving, or we stop breathing. Taylor shot him a glare. That's not a plan, that's suicide. Hunt cut in, her tone razor-sharp. It's survival. We hold until sunrise. By then drones will spot the wreck. If we're alive, they'll send QRF. Until then, we make every bullet count. Morgan's voice cracked. Sunrise, that's hours away. Then make peace with it, Hunt replied flatly, sliding a fresh mag into her rifle. Because that's what we've got. The canyon darkened as the moon ducked behind clouds, shadows stretching long. The sound of boots on gravel carried faintly now, measured, disciplined. Not the reckless rush of amateurs. These were hunters, and the canyon was their kill box. Hunt exhaled slowly, steadying her heartbeat. The fear was there, clawing at her chest, but she forced it into a corner. She needed the fear sharp, controlled, not consuming. Herrera moved back to the doorway, his rifle angled up the slope. First contact, north wall, 2 silhouettes. Hold fire, Hunt ordered. Make them commit. The figures moved closer, picking their way down the rocks, rifles glinting faintly. Then a third shadow appeared behind them, and another. They were spreading, flanking. Hunt's muscles tensed. Timing was everything. Too early and they'd give away their position. Too late and the canyon would flood with hostiles. The decision snapped into place. Herrera now. The canyon exploded with gunfire. Herrera's rifle barked in sharp, controlled bursts. 2 silhouettes dropped instantly, their bodies tumbling down rock. The third bolted for cover, rounds sparking at his heels. Then the night erupted. Automatic fire roared from the ridges, tracers cutting through darkness. Bullets pinged against the wreck, sparks flying. The Black Hawk's broken hull became their shield, its once-proud body now reduced to a barricade. Contact left, Morgan shouted, firing blindly into muzzle flashes. Taylor ducked as rounds chewed the dirt inches from Burke's stretcher. They're trying to flank. Hunt leaned out, her rifle spitting fire. She hit 1, maybe 2, the recoil steady against her shoulder. She shifted back, breath ragged, adrenaline burning hot. The canyon smelled of gunpowder, dust, and fear. Herrera's laughter rang out, wild and defiant. Come on, you bastards, this bird ain't done yet. But the enemy pressed harder, disciplined bursts eating closer with every volley. Shadows darted between rocks, climbing higher for angles. Hunt's gut twisted. They were boxing them in. Conserve ammo, she barked, slamming a fresh mag. Pick your shots. Morgan's breathing was ragged, his hands shaking as he lined up careful shots. 1 down, north wall, he shouted, hope flickering in his voice. Then a sound tore through the canyon that froze Hunt's blood, the hollow thump of an RPG tube. Down, she screamed. The rocket slammed into the wreck's tail, detonating in a ball of fire. The Black Hawk rocked violently, metal shrieking, debris showering the survivors. Hunt hit the ground hard, ears ringing, smoke filling her lungs. Status, she coughed, crawling back to her knees. I'm good, Herrera shouted, voice hoarse, still in the fight. Taylor, Morgan. Taylor's voice came strained but alive. We're here, Burke's stable, shaken but stable. Relief flashed, but it was fleeting. Another RPG whooshed across the canyon, striking rock just above them. Shards rained down like knives, slicing into uniforms and skin. Hunt felt blood trickle down her temple, but she stayed focused, rifle up. They couldn't hold like this, not pinned, not with explosives. Her mind raced, calculating. They needed space. They needed high ground, but moving Burke was impossible in this firestorm. Captain, Herrera's voice cut sharp. I've got an idea, door guns still mounted. Not much ammo, but enough to buy time. Hunt's eyes flicked to the twisted Black Hawk. The door gun hung crooked, its belt half full, exposed, dangerous, but it could break the enemy's momentum. She locked eyes with Herrera. "You won't survive out there." He grinned, savage and certain. "Then I'll make sure they don't either." For a heartbeat, Hunt saw Mitchell again, her commander's steady smile in the face of death. And in Herrera's reckless courage, she saw the same fire. Her throat tightened. She wanted to order him back, to forbid it, but leadership wasn't about saving everyone. It was about giving survival a chance. She nodded once sharply. "Do it." Herrera vaulted into the wreckage, yanking the gun into place. The canyon roared as he unleashed it, tracers ripping into the night, suppressing every ridge. Sparks lit the walls, shadows dropping in sprays of blood and dust. "Move," Hunt shouted to the others. "Shift Burke deeper into cover." Morgan and Taylor scrambled, dragging the stretcher toward a pocket of rock. Hunt laid down bursts, keeping the enemy's heads low. Bullets whipped past her ears, hot with death, but she stayed steady. Herrera's laughter boomed again as he fired, fearless, unstoppable. Then the gun clicked empty. The canyon fell silent for a split second. And then the mercenaries roared back, a hail of gunfire converging on Herrera's position. Sparks erupted, bullets chewed metal. Hunt's heart seized. "Herrera!" she screamed. Through smoke and chaos, his silhouette was still there, still firing even with nothing left. Defiance itself, daring death to come closer. And as the canyon burned around them, Valerie Hunt realized they weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for each other, for every promise unspoken, for every ghost that still haunted the night. The world had narrowed to fire and noise. Valerie Hunt pressed her shoulder against the Black Hawk's twisted frame, her rifle barking in short bursts, eyes burning from smoke. Every shot felt borrowed, every second stolen. Herrera's silhouette blazed at the doorway, his figure lit by tracers as if carved from the chaos itself. He had no ammo left. She knew it. They all knew it. But still he stood there, yanking the gun's smoking barrel, squeezing the trigger like defiance could will the belt back to life. He screamed into the night, a sound half-war cry, half-mad laughter. Then the mercenaries answered. A torrent of gunfire cut through the wreck. Sparks leapt like lightning. Metal splintered. Herrera staggered once, twice, then straightened again. He kept firing his rifle now, every round deliberate, measured. He refused to fall. "Cover him," Hunt barked, firing into the muzzle flashes on the ridge. Taylor and Morgan joined, their bursts desperate, frantic. For a heartbeat, they pushed the enemy back. But the canyon walls betrayed them. Shadows slipped higher, rifles angling down. An RPG streaked across the sky, detonating against the far wall. The blast lit the scene in brutal orange. And in that flash, Hunt saw it. Herrera hit square in the chest. The impact spun him backward, his body crashing hard against the fuselage. "No," the cry tore from her throat, raw and breaking. She lunged forward, dragging him back inside as rounds chewed the dirt where he had stood. His weight was heavy, his body limp. Blood spread hot across her gloves. Herrera's eyes fluttered, his grin faint, crooked. "Told you, not done yet." "Stay with me," Hunt commanded, pressing a bandage hard against the wound. "You hear me? You hold." He coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Better me than Burke, better me than you." His hand clutched hers weakly, the strength draining by the second. "You fly like Mitchell. Knew you had it in you." Her chest cracked open at the name. Mitchell. The ghost she had carried for half a year, the weight of every choice since. And here was Herrera, handing her back her own strength with his last breath. His grip slackened, his eyes stilled. Valerie Hunt froze. For a heartbeat, the battle vanished. No sound, no fire, only the weight of loss pressing like a mountain. Then gunfire ripped her back. Bullets pinged against the wreck, Morgan screaming, "They're pushing, we're overrun." She clenched her teeth, rage surging hotter than grief. Her hands shook, not with fear but fury. She grabbed Herrera's rifle, fresh mag snapping into place with finality. "You want us," she hissed under her breath. "Then come take us." She pivoted to the doorway, rifle blazing. Each shot was a promise, each round a debt collected. Shadows dropped on the ridge, tracers slicing the night. Morgan and Taylor joined in, their fire merging with hers, a desperate symphony of survival. But the mercenaries were relentless. More figures poured into the canyon, disciplined, coordinated. Suppressive fire pinned them flat. Another RPG streaked in, exploding near the stretcher. Burke's body jolted from the blast, Taylor shielding him with his own frame. He's not gonna make another one of those. Hunt's mind raced. They couldn't stay. Every second here was a death sentence. She glanced up the canyon. Jagged rocks, steep incline, patches of shadow. If they abandoned the wreck, they might slip into higher ground. Risky, but staying was suicide. She made the call. "We're moving. Grab Burke, Morgan, Taylor on me." Morgan's eyes went wide. "Ma'am, there's no way he survives a climb." "He won't survive staying either," she snapped. "Now move." They scrambled, dragging Burke's stretcher toward the canyon wall. Hunt laid down, covering fire, her rifle hot, the magazine burning low. She could feel Herrera's absence at her side, a hole carved into the fight, but she filled it with fury. The mercenaries advanced, their shadows stretching longer, closer. Hunt's rounds picked them off one by one, but for each that fell, another emerged. She reloaded, hands slick with blood and sweat. "Taylor up the wall first," she ordered. Taylor slung his rifle, hauling himself up the jagged rock, dragging the stretcher with Morgan's help. Bullets sparked around them, chips of stone stinging their faces. Hunt covered, her shots echoing, each one precise. She felt her arms shake, her breath burn, but she refused to falter. Then her rifle clicked empty. The sound was louder than any explosion. Her hands moved automatically, reaching for another mag. Empty pouch. She cursed it under her breath, grabbing Herrera's last sidearm from her vest. A pistol now, close quarters, not enough, never enough. The mercenaries pressed harder, shouts echoing, boots pounding gravel. She fired the pistol steady, every shot buying seconds. "Almost there," Morgan shouted from above, dragging Burke higher. Hunt backed toward the wall, firing until the slide locked back. Empty. No time, no options. And then she heard it, a distant rumble, low and growing. Not mercenary trucks, not RPGs, something heavier, steadier. The sound of rotors. Her heart lurched. She slammed her headset on, voice breaking. "Base, this is Blackbird. We're pinned, marking position with IR. Do you copy?" Static, then Blackbird, this is QRF. We have you. Hold tight. Relief and disbelief crashed over her in equal force. Rescue was coming, but they had to survive long enough for it to matter. The mercenaries knew it too. Their fire doubled, frantic, desperate to finish the job before air support arrived. The canyon became a storm of bullets, every rock sparking, every breath a gamble. Valerie Hunt pressed her back to the wall, pistol raised. No rounds left, but her will unbroken. She looked up at Morgan and Taylor dragging Burke to safety, then back at the shadows closing in. Her chest heaved, her arms trembled, but her eyes burned bright. She wasn't done yet. The night was on fire. Valerie Hunt pressed her back against the canyon wall, pistol empty, her chest heaving. The mercenaries poured forward, shouts echoing like wolves on the hunt. She was out of ammo, out of time, but not out of will. She braced herself, ready to meet them with nothing but her bare hands if that was what it took. And then the sky thundered. Rotors beat the air, low and fierce, the sound rolling through the canyon like salvation itself. Hunt's eyes snapped upward. Over the ridge, dark shapes cut across the sky, two Apache, guns glowing in the night, and a Chinook trailing behind, its belly heavy with troops. The mercenaries hesitated. For a single heartbeat, their charge faltered, and in that pause hell descended. The Apache opened fire, their cannons raking the canyon walls. Rock exploded. Shadows scattered. Gunfire from above chewed through the mercenary lines, shredding their cover. Hunt dropped to the dirt as shockwaves ripped the air, the night filled with thunder and flame. The mercenaries broke. Some tried to flee back up the slope, others fired wildly at the sky, their discipline shattered. One by one, they fell under the relentless rain of fire. Then the Chinook roared overhead, searchlights blazing, and dropped its ramp. Figures poured out, QRF soldiers in full kit, rifles blazing, moving like a tide of steel. "Cover," one of them shouted, bounding forward. For the first time in hours, Hunt felt something close to relief. She pushed herself upright, pistol still raised though useless, and staggered toward the fight. "Here, friendly positions," she shouted, waving her free arm. The QRF moved fast, their fire coordinated, systematic. Mercenaries dropped in clusters, their desperate fight swallowed by superior force. Within minutes, the canyon was no longer a battlefield. It was a graveyard. Silence fell again, broken only by the fatting echoes of rotor wash and the groans of the dying. A sergeant in QRF gear approached, visor lifted, eyes sharp. "Captain Hunt." She nodded, her voice hoarse. "We've got wounded critical. Burke needs evac now." "On it," he signaled, and medics rushed forward, lifting Burke's stretcher with practiced urgency. Taylor and Morgan sagged with exhaustion, but their faces lit with the faintest flicker of hope. Hunt's body wanted to collapse, every muscle trembling with fatigue, but she forced herself steady. "One more," she said, her voice softer now. She gestured toward the Black Hawk's wreckage, where Herrera's body lay still, his rifle across his chest. The sergeant's eyes flicked there, then back to her. He gave a slow nod. "We'll bring him home, too." Her throat tightened. She crouched by Herrera, brushing the dust from his face. For a moment, all the noise fell away. It was just her, the canyon, and the man who had laughed in the face of death. "You held the line," she whispered. "You bought us time, you bought us sunrise." She closed his eyes with her gloved hand, her chest heavy but steady. When she stood, the Apache circled above, the Chinook idling with its ramp down. The QRF medics secured Burke inside, Taylor and Morgan climbing after. The sergeant motioned her forward. "Captain, we need to lift off now. Hostiles could regroup." She hesitated, glancing back at the Black Hawk. Her bird, twisted, broken, but still standing in its way as if it had fought beside her every step. She walked to its battered hull, pressing one hand against the scorched metal. "Thank you," she murmured. Not to a machine, but to a comrade. The bird had carried her through one last fight, and she would never forget it. Then she turned, climbing the ramp into the Chinook. Inside, the medics worked furiously over Burke, IV lines running, oxygen mask strapped tight. His chest rose and fell shallow, but it rose. Taylor sat beside him, eyes closed in exhausted prayer. Morgan slumped against the bulkhead, hands shaking, eyes wide with the disbelief of survival. Hunt sank onto a bench, helmet heavy in her lap. Her arms ached, her body screamed, but her mind was louder. Images replayed on a loop. Herrera's grin, Burke's shallow breaths, the Black Hawk's final dive, Mitchell's voice echoing from the past. "We're going down. I'll see you on the other side, Blackbird." For months that ghost had haunted her. Mitchell's last words, the failure she couldn't let go. Tonight she had faced the same fire, the same odds, and she had not let it end the same way. She had flown again. She had saved who she could. And though she hadn't brought everyone back, she had brought most. That was war. That was command. That was the unbearable weight she had sworn to carry. The Chinook rose, the canyon falling away beneath them. Dawn was breaking on the horizon, painting the desert in pale gold. Hunt watched it in silence, the first light washing over the wreck below, over the bodies left behind, over the scar the night had carved. Herrera would not see this sunrise. Mitchell never had, but she did. And in that rising light, Valerie Hunt felt something shift inside her. Not peace that would never come, but purpose. She lifted her helmet, sliding it back on, her voice steady in the comms as she spoke, not to QRF, not to command, but to herself. Blackbird still flies. The words settled like an oath, quiet but unbreakable. And as the Chinook carried them home, Valerie Hunt closed her eyes, knowing the war wasn't over, but knowing at last that she was ready to fight it.